Hello, everybody, and welcome to our December virtual Salesforce Administrator User Group meeting, the last one of 2022. It's good to see you all. So today we are going to be recording the meeting. I will be sharing slide decks and the recording onto our YouTube channel, which will be available. There'll be links available in our user group community. And yes, ask questions. We have some really interesting hosts with us, or presenters with us today. So use this time to pick their brains. We're lucky to have them. We're going to start off with just a bit of a chat. Anyone who's new to the group, please introduce yourself to us. And if there are people who aren't new to the group but still want to chat and tell us about interesting things that they're doing, this is a great time to do it. In around 12:15 or so, we're going to start with Ian Gotts from Elements.Cloud. Ian will introduce himself if you don't already know him. He'll walk us through the new DevOps Center, which has gone GA.
Sandy.
Hi, Nash.
Right, we see your name and then let's see. We see your agenda in small screen. I don't know. Does anybody else see it this way or just me?
I'm seeing it full screen.
Yeah, I'm seeing it full screen too.
Okay, sorry then.
It's okay.
Keep going. It's me.
It's all good. Nice to see you, Nash. Okay, yeah. And then we're going to be chatting with Marcus Udekang about process modeling for business analysts. I'm especially interested about this with the focus that's been going on with the Salesforce business analyst certification that's out there. I really wanted to bring in Marcus's input because he's been doing business analyst for a long time now. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what he has to say, not necessarily from a Salesforce perspective, but from some of the core skills of being a business analyst. So looking forward to that. And then if time permits at the end, networking, talk about the future, talk about anything you want, interesting projects, Christmas parties, or whatever you want. That's essentially it. So for those who are new to the group, I'd love you to go ahead and say hello to us and let us know what your role is in the Salesforce ecosphere and anything else you'd like to know about us. Let us know about you.
Well, let me introduce myself.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, this is my second meeting and I have immigrated recently to the Canada. And now I am searching job in Salesforce admin and developer. I have 2 years of experience in Salesforce admin. Now I'm doing 200 badges in Trailhead. I have 200 badges in Trailhead. And I'm looking an opportunity in Salesforce.
Welcome back, Priya. I remember you. I remember meeting you last time. Yeah.
Yes, sir. This is my second time.
Was there a particular area in Salesforce that you're more interested in, like sales, service?
Sales, service, whereas in admin and developers are both I am interested in doing.
Awesome. Well, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I'll introduce myself. Like, it's my first time here, so my name is Marwan Benchik. So I'm a Salesforce developer. So I've been working in Salesforce ecosystem for the last 5 years. I immigrated to Canada, I think 3 years ago. So, and I immigrated to Toronto area, and then I moved to the Ottawa, I think a year and a half ago. But I'm still working with the Oakville company. It's called Geotab. So I'm a Salesforce developer there. We have a few different products for Salesforce: Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Community, Digital Experience Now, and Marketing Cloud, and Field Service as well. So I have my hand on almost all those, which is cool. We're hoping to have CPQ next year, so that's also very interesting. So I've been working with them the last 3 years. The good thing is that every year we're learning new stuff, so that's cool. So yeah, I have like 6 Salesforce certification. You know, taking I'm taking it easy. Like I like to do one certification per year. I don't like to go crazy. So yeah, so that's pretty much it for me. Nice to meet you all, guys.
Madawan, welcome. Good to have you. Always good to have
Thanks.
developer chops on the meeting too. It's always great. Anyone else want to say hello this afternoon?
I'll say hello. It's been a while since I've been in the meeting. My name's Alistair Dinning. Ian's looked up because he's heard me before. We've met before in different conversations. I'm actually in Montreal, but I've worked with a number of customers in the Ottawa region, which is why I kind of loiter around this user group. I try and show up when I can. I'm a consultant. I am actually now a solution architect at Salesforce Professional Services because the partner I was working with was acquired by Salesforce in the summer. So it's exciting to be here, but I've worked with David. I see David Corns is joining too. He was a customer once upon a time. And so, yeah, hello.
Alistair, nice to have you here and see you again. I do remember you. Anybody
I'd
else
like to say hi. I guess I've been at many of these meetings like way back in in-person days and getting back into it. So I worked at Salesforce, or not at Salesforce, with Salesforce in several jobs, and I got my admin certification a few years ago. But lately I've been working with HubSpot, which didn't, I still would attend these meetings because CRM problems are CRM problems. They're not always, not always, you can still get good ideas, even if it's in a different system a lot of the time. But now we're going to migrate to Salesforce. So I'm actually interested if anyone has experience migrating from HubSpot to Salesforce and some tips that you might have. Anybody experienced that before? I have. I'm very much looking forward to it, as you can imagine. There are a few things that are just fundamental in Salesforce that are not in HubSpot. So hi to everyone.
Susan, that sounds like a super fun project. Yeah, if anyone does have experience, make sure you ping Susan and start a conversation for sure. Would anyone else like to say hello? No, I think we're doing good. Ian, how are you feeling? Are you feeling ready to tell us all about the DevOps Center?
Yeah, of course.
All right, then. Instead of me giving you a big introduction, I know you're capable of just taking the reins and running with it. I kick it over to you. Feel free to share the screen as you like.
Where are we? So share screen. There we go. Right. So can you see the screen there? Yes, you should be able to. Fantastic. So yeah, so this is all about going to be about DevOps Center. DevOps Center clearly is a Salesforce product. I don't work for Salesforce, so there isn't a safe harbor statement. But again, all the things I'm talking about are based on our experience. Life moves on quite quickly at Salesforce. So again, some of the answers to your questions I may have to defer to you to go back to Salesforce. At the end of the presentation, there are a couple of QR codes. One's a link to an implementation guide we wrote with Salesforce, and the second is a link to the Trailhead group where people like Karen Fidelak, who's the product manager, very active in terms of answering those questions. So 3 numbers about me: 10 years as a consultant, well, a bit more than that, with Accenture, 20 years as a Salesforce customer. Actually, it's 21, so I'm allowed to drink now, and 30 years in the business analysis world. So as you've gathered, I'm pretty old. We were involved in building an integration to Salesforce DevOps. So I want to spend time talking about what Salesforce DevOps is and the opportunity associated with it. Happy to answer questions as we go along. This is a lot more about Salesforce than it's anything to do with Elements.Cloud, which is the products where I'm the CEO. And there'll be hints of that as we go along, but let's spend some time talking about DevOps Center. And as I said, I'll keep an eye on the chat, or Sandy, if you can let me know if there are questions that come in. I'll try and pick them up as I go along. So the first question is, what is DevOps Center? It is the simple way is to describe it is it's the free replacement for change sets. So if you spend your life fighting change sets, this should be a breath of fresh air. Change sets have had no love, I think, ever. And it's been several years in development in terms of building Salesforce DevOps Center. And there are some fundamental changes in the way that people may need to work to use DevOps Center to take advantage of it. And I think that's really today's discussions about what you need to do to change, and then what the benefits of those changes are. So let's start with a quote from Karen. DevOps Center is about making change and release management and introducing DevOps best practices to our entire community, regardless of where you fall on the low code to pro code spectrum. So really what they're trying to do is they're trying to build some best practices that maybe if you're a developer, you go, well, yes, that's how you should work. Where maybe if you're in the admin community, you're used to using change sets, you don't understand source control. So it's trying to get everyone to work to a consistent way. So it's going to be a bigger change for admins than is necessary for developers, but there may be some changes for developers. But it's trying to bring everyone in your development team closer together. Now, if you're a solo admin, then you are the development team, so it's a change of working. But if you are in a bigger team where you've got developers, maybe using Git, using scripts to push changes around, it's about getting some consistency there. Okay, so and one word that you probably didn't miss, this is the free replacement for change sets. So there's no cost to do this. If you choose to move to DevOps Center, it went GA on Friday, on the 9th. So it's now available. Anybody can start to use it. Anyone can start implementing it. You don't have to use it for everything. You can use it alongside change sets. But I think people who we've talked to who through the pilot and through the beta phase have moved away from change sets to moving DevOps Center. Okay. So that was the vision. Let me just talk about just the features and get some principles here. So a lot of words on the slides. It's a Salesforce slide. In fact, it's not currently in open beta. It's actually now gone live. So the first thing is it's point and click. It's a sort of a modern UI. So instead of, I know if you look at developers and they're writing scripts and you've got no idea what they're doing, this is meant to be a modern UI. That's the first thing. So it's point and click. So anyone should be able to use it. The second most important thing I think is it now has version control. So when you're making your changes, it is automatically pushing those changes to GitHub in the background. So before you use that, really your org was the source of truth. Any changes you made to the org, they were in the org. You've now got sort of version control, so it's now pushing those changes back and forth to GitHub in the background. You don't need to worry about what it's doing because it's got all the plumbing, it's doing all the work back and forth. The next thing is that you can start to define environments. So you've got a pipeline that says, okay, I've got, development, integration test, UAT, production. So you've got a pipeline, and DevOps Center is managing the changes as they work their way through that pipeline. So the second concept is actually thinking about pipelines. Now you may only have one. You may go, sandbox into production. But here you can have more sophisticated pipelines and you can have more than one. And then the last thing is that it says working with hybrid teams. That's the idea of actually making sure that you're working to the same source control if you're the admin using this DevOps Center as your developers are. So there's some consistency rather than they're working with GitHub and then you're working with change sets and then there's conflicts.
Ian, can I jump in with a quick question?
Of course, yes.
For the benefit of some of our newer, let's say, admins, can you give us a brief overview of what GitHub is?
Yeah. Well, GitHub is a source control system. So think of it as the backend database where it's tracking and storing all the changes. So if you made, say, a change to a page layout because you added a new field and you added a new field to, say, the account object, when you use DevOps Center, it will push those changes to the metadata and store them actually in GitHub. So it's basically a backend database storing those changes.
Thanks, that's great.
Okay. So let's just think about, before we launch back into features and functionality, let's just think about the size or the scale of the problem. We estimate there are about 100,000 orgs out there, or 100,000 organizations. Rough maths, probably 20,000, 30,000 people, organizations out there are using a more sophisticated DevOps solution like Capado or Gearset or Flowsum or AutoRabbit or Prodly or Opsera. I'm sure I forgot, Blue Canvas. So these are paid products that actually would compete with Salesforce DevOps, but they're actually more sophisticated. Okay, so there are people using that, and there are developers who've written scripts to push changes between orgs. So there are 20,000 there. You then go, well, of the total people who are genuinely moving metadata between orgs, i.e. they're using sandboxes in production, there are 100,000 in total. We know that from the numbers from Salesforce. Can obviously see how many orgs are out there pushing metadata changes between orgs. So there are 100,000 organizations out there who are using at least one sandbox and production, which means there are about 80,000 companies out there where Salesforce DevOps is relevant. There's also, you might look at it and go, hang on, you only said 100,000, but there are way more customers than that. Those other customers must be just doing work straight into production or never making any changes. Scary, I know, but that's what they're doing. So maybe they found it was too hard to use change sets. Hopefully this will give them an opportunity to start working with sandboxes, so they're actually building some more rigorous development processes in place. So this is really aimed at that 80,000 people who haven't already got a DevOps solution, and those people who are developing straight into production. Again, I don't have any numbers for how many people so far have taken up DevOps Center. I think a lot of people were waiting for GA, and GA was, as I said, last Friday. But part of this is the next slide, which is really the opportunity.
Can I stop you just for a second and ask
Yeah,
a
of
quick
course.
question? So the numbers you're quoting, are those numbers Salesforce gave you, or
Yes.
how did you get those numbers?
They're the ones that Karen and I talked about. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So Karen is the product manager for DevOps Center. So she and I sat down and just did sort of back of a cigarette packet, like, what do we reckon the numbers are? The hard number is 100,000. We had to try and guess how many people were using a more formal solution. But the point is, it's a huge opportunity to get people working in a better way. Which really comes to the point here, which is, yes, you're going to have to change. So let's not lose this opportunity of making the change. So if I think about that picture on the right-hand side is the typical ALM, application lifecycle management process. So plan, so work out what you're going to do, code, merge, test UAT, user acceptance testing, and then release. This is a very IT dev-centric view. I think Marcus will be rolling his eyes here going, hang on, plan is way bigger than just like a fifth of the quadrant. I mean, planning is all about the business analysis, understanding requirements, mapping out, understanding the data model, it's understanding the risk, it's building user stories. But if we think about plan being, you've got to a point where you know what you want to build, and then you pass it over to the development team to go and build. Many organizations are not doing that first piece of work, the plan piece, very well. The business analysis certification has just come out, and I won't steal Marcus's thunder because he can talk very eloquently about business analysis. But there's been a big push inside Salesforce to get people to do a lot more upfront thinking. So the business analysis certification, the well-architected program being spearheaded by Parker Harris, Zane Turner's running that, but there's a big push in terms of well-architected. Kat Holmes has just taken over from Justin McGuire as Chief Design Officer inside Salesforce to push the fact that you should be thinking about user design before you start building. So Salesforce is putting a lot more emphasis on the things that you should do before you start developing. If anyone's done any Trailhead badges, it says, oh, the first thing you do is build an object. No. Think about why you want to build an object before you start building it. Think about what the users need, not what they thought they wanted. So the opportunity here is if you're about to implement DevOps Center, before you just say it's a lift and shift straight replacement between change sets straight into DevOps Center, there's an opportunity to actually think about what the development process looks like. The same way as, sorry, I've forgotten your name, but the person who was moving between HubSpot and Salesforce, that shouldn't be a lift and shift. That should be an opportunity to revisit and maybe simplify some of the processes before you implement them in Salesforce. The only place simplify comes before automate, sorry, the only place automate comes before simplify is in the dictionary. Okay, the only place automate comes before simplify is in the dictionary. You should use an opportunity to go, are we doing this the best way? How much custom and practice has been built up? Let's use this as the catalyst. So we're going to make some changes. Let's make sure we make the most of it. And I want to spend a little bit of time really now talking about how I think you should plan for DevOps Center rather than the straight implementation. We'll look at some of the slides, the features in a moment. But there's an opportunity here to use this as a chance to really fix what is a broken development process. I present this a lot live. I get people to say, okay, who here is building stuff that users don't want? Everybody puts a hand up. It's like, we've got to fix that. Okay, I can save you 100% of that time of building stuff you don't want. And just one short story from our world. We obviously use Salesforce. We've got a very rigorous business analysis process, which you obviously hope, as that's what our product does. But we were doing, the sales team wanted some changes put in. Our business excellence team went and did the business analysis to understand exactly what was needed. They went through, looked at the data model, they looked at the impact of making the changes. They then came up with the user stories and scoped out the changes. So that's all the plan phase. They went back to the sales team and said, it's about 4 weeks worth of work to make those changes. And the sales team said, no, in that case, we don't want it. There are more important things. We'd rather have you do different things with those 4 weeks of work for 4 people. So we did all that business analysis work and never built it. And that was the right answer because we saved all the time of building it so that they could reprioritize and go, there are better things that we want done. And I think we're very quick to jump into building stuff without doing sufficient analysis. And again, there's a lot of pressure from the business users going, well, I've seen the Salesforce videos, just build it. How hard can it be? I think you have to try and resist that. The same is true for this, which is DevOps Center is free. It's a replacement for change sets. Just flip it on, they just switch it on, and you're missing the opportunity to actually fix what are some broken processes. So if we think about the first phase of the plan bit is build the right things, make sure you're building the right things. So then you can then build the things right. So DevOps Center is all about building the things right. And making it faster, improving the efficiency, again, eliminating the nightmare of using change sets. So the reason we know about DevOps Center is that we built an integration from when it was in its earlier stages in beta. So really, we are Elements.Cloud is build the right things, requirements, process mapping, understand the org, build user stories. And then the handoff to DevOps Center is then we've got a work item. Everyone talks about shift left from a development perspective. And people tend to think about shift left as let's just make sure we've discovered the problems earlier in the build phase. But actually you can shift even further left. If you find the problems, like the conflicts of, say, 3 people are going to change one metadata item, or the requirements aren't right, earlier in the cycle, business analysis, it is significantly cheaper to fix it. Not rocket science, but again, I'm trying to give you the sorts of evidence that to use to push back when business users are going, just build it. That word just is the scariest word in the admin vocabulary. Just add a record type, just add a pick list value. Another short story, we synced an org. So Elements, we synchronize all the metadata and build a metadata dictionary. So we get to see lots and lots of orgs. We saw one the other day, 29,000 items in the queue. No idea. We only get to see the road accident. We don't get to see how they got themselves into that problem. But another one was customer 256 record types on opportunity, 130 pick list fields on the opportunity. Some of those pick list fields had hundreds of values. And if you're an admin out here, you know that you have to map every pick list value to a record type. There were 5 million mappings. And we then went, because we also can tell you how well populated things are, only one record type had data in it. Again, no idea whether they built it all and then divested the business or whatever. But the reason that they wanted to do that analysis is they wanted to try and merge two orgs. And we went, no, before you merge them, one is Dilbert and one's War and Peace. You need to simplify this before you put them together. So again, it's back to that sort of front-end business analysis. But I digress as usual. So let's just think about the architecture of DevOps Center. A couple of important concepts. Firstly, they have a concept called a work item. Sometimes you would call it a user story. So there is a work item. That work item is a collection of metadata. And that work item with its metadata gets pushed through a series of orgs, which is called a pipeline. And then behind the scenes, it's pushing data back and forth into GitHub. So maybe some new concepts for you, which is work items, which are user stories, work items containing metadata, work items being pushed through a pipeline, and then a source control system behind the scenes called GitHub. If you are using Jira, there isn't currently, and I know it's on their roadmap, there isn't currently an integration to Jira. So if you have Jira and you're using that for your user stories, then you'll have to keep those in sync with work items. If you're using Elements, then we have actually make sure those all stay in sync. The other issue, no, I won't worry about that for the moment. But what Elements is doing is we are helping you push those user stories in and then see all the context. But let's not worry about Elements for the moment. Let's think about DevOps Center. So the first thing in DevOps Center is, and these are DevOps Center screens. Once you've set it up, it will then ask you for the orgs that you have so you can connect those orgs into a pipeline. So in our diagram here, to the left of here, which you can't see because they don't exist in DevOps Center, are all your development orgs. So the concept would be each developer has their own org, their own developer org. Then they commit changes, and then in this case, it goes into approved work items, UAT, staging, production. So this particular picture we're looking at, there are 4 different steps in the pipeline. Well, so with DevOps Center, you can have multiple pipelines. So you can decide to put a particular change through a particular pipeline based on the risk or the complexity of that change. Highly complex change, maybe it needs to go through the full 4 or 5 stage process. You may have a hot fix, which is just sandbox into production. You may have a mid-range one, which is just UAT sandbox UAT production. So you can set up multiple pipelines and then you push work items through them. And here you can see different work items, work item 41, 36, 35 in this stage, in UAT, 40, 38, and so on. So you can see how they're moving through. One other thing you'll see here, I'll come back to promotion failed in a moment, but can you see staging? That's called a bundled stage. So at that point, when you push any change from staging to production, it will roll up all of those work items into one and push them through. So again, an important thing here, if you're used to using change sets, normally you have to put every single change into a change set, and therefore they become enormous. So if you're building, say, a new HR app, you could have many hundreds of items in that change set. You then push it to the next org, you've then got to rebuild that change set, and you've got to rebuild it again. With DevOps Center, 2 things. One is, once you've added the metadata items to a work item, you just push that work item through the pipeline. You don't have to keep on rebuilding it. That's the first thing. The second thing is, because you've got this concept of bundling, you can split your those changes into multiple work items and push them through at different cadences until you get to staging, at which point then they all come back together again and you push them as one lump, which means you can break out a massive change into a number of work items, which makes it a lot more manageable. Is this all still making sense?
It does. Well, to me, I'm just checking up. I'm seeing a comment from Susan. 8 fields on a contact record created specifically for one event. Admin rage. Yeah, I hear you. At the risk of derailing your flow, it'd be interesting to know for the gear sets and the other applications out there how this compares to their offerings. Or is it apples and oranges?
This is baby steps. This is baby steps. This is, I mean, a gear set or Capado, because we integrate and team with them as well. For them, this is not competition. This actually, in a number of ways, is getting more people to understand the concepts of DevOps properly. And then people, if you go, this is great, and then people start asking the question, which is, well, what about Bitbucket? Or how do you do merge conflicts? Or how do you do rollbacks? The answer is, sorry, that's not DevOps Center yet. So part of being an ISV, a technology partner with any big company, we were a Microsoft partner in my last company, we're a Salesforce partner here. If you are good at what you do, there are lots of dollar coins you can pick up in front of the steamroller. But if you slow down, you'll get run over. The same is true here. Provided the gear sets, the Capados keep innovating, they will always be ahead of where DevOps Center is. If they stay still, eventually DevOps Center will catch them up, and then people will make the decision, which is, well, DevOps Center versus gear set. Bear in mind, DevOps Center, this release is free. Future releases will not be. They've been made it very, so when it comes to added functionality around, say, Jira integrations or supporting other source control systems like Bitbucket or GitLab, then they may not be free. This at the moment is the free offering, and it will stay free forever. So the core offering will be free. So again, if you're a gear set, Capado, I wouldn't be concerned. Capado has a product called Capado Essentials, which I think is at risk, but their core enterprise product isn't.
That's great. Thank you, Ian.
Okay, no problem.
Will this replace change sets completely? Like change sets will go away?
I think ideally that's what they want to happen. But I think if you look over history, I mean, I've been around Salesforce 20 years. They struggle to deprecate anything completely. I mean, there's still S controls hanging around. They're still classic. I think Salesforce would like people to get away from change sets. I was going to say that they won't continue to do any innovation around change sets, but then again, they haven't anyway, so that won't change. But I mean, to be honest, change sets haven't had any love over the last 5 years anyway, so it's not like there was a roadmap of things to happen to change sets. So I think there will be a natural evolution of people going, actually, this is just a better way of working. And with all things, there's always a bit of pain with making a change to work in a different way. But I think the evidence from all the people on the pilot was it just makes life easier. Yes, you've got to think about things in a slightly different way, but the pain of building a change set, I don't think I've got it written down, but a quote from Marcus and Millichap, who were an early customer, they said, you're delighted when a change set goes through, sometimes even surprised. With DevOps Center, you're disappointed if it doesn't. And I think that actually talks volumes for what they've done here in terms of making the process easier.
Ian, is there support for scratch orgs here? Because change sets obviously support permanent sandboxes, persistent orgs, i.e. sandboxes.
Yeah.
And I may have missed it, but where does scratch orgs fit into this equation?
Well, scratch orgs are development orgs. So actually, as you'll see in a moment, DevOps Center doesn't know about anything until you connect it to an org. from a development perspective. So maybe it's the next slide. Let me just, maybe I can answer that. No, actually it's there. Okay. So you can have a scratch org where you're making your changes. It isn't till as a developer you say, I want to commit these changes and start them into DevOps Center, into Sandbox or whatever step you're going to. What happens is you then create a work item. You then it says, well, okay, where am I going to find the changes? That's the point you would connect it to the scratch org. So DevOps Center doesn't know about the development environments until you tell it.
Okay.
So if I just go back a step, if I go back through 3 slides and then explain that in a little bit more slowly. These are work items. These work items have all been manually created. So you go in and you say, I want to go and create a work item. It's called migrate, I don't know, process builder work to flow. It then says, where are the changes? And you go there in, I happen to be the developer and working in developer 1, dev 1. So my changes are in dev 1. And then you can ask it to pull the changes from that org since the last time the changes were made. So it's rather than the change set approach of I'll build it item by item, it will pull all the changes it can find, and then you can just simply check them off and say these are all the ones that I want to put in the org. And then if there are things it hasn't found, or you know that there are other things I need to add, that box there, add components manually, is where you'd add them.
Thank you.
So that's perfect. So actually that was really where I was going anyway, which is this concept of you should expect each developer to have their own org where they're doing the development. You then create a work item. Either if you've got Elements, you'd create the work item maybe in Elements or via Jira because of the Elements integration, or if you haven't got Elements, then you just create them manually inside DevOps Center. It then connects to an org. It will then pull the changes that since the last time it did a sync. And then you've now got those changes added, and so they are now the changes that are going to get pushed through that pipeline.
I interrupted, asked another question. When you said, did you say pull changes? We'll go and find all the changes that you've made in that dev org and put it into the dev ops process?
Correct. Since the last commit, yes.
Thank God for that.
So it doesn't put them in automatically. It gives you this list, so you can then check them off. So you can click the checkbox there, and it will add all of them. So yes, this is a way of very quickly adding all those, finding those changes. Now, it may be there are changes that it doesn't know about, because there wasn't a change made, but you know that you need to go and add something. So you can also add other components manually.
Can you push stuff back up? So I saw this in, it might have been a Capado demo, where you've got dev org 1, 2, 3, then a staging org or a UAT org, and then production in a simple book. And developer 1 does stuff that gets promoted to staging. Then we go, oh, that's great. So we're going to push that forward. So we then actually also want to push that change back into dev orgs 2 and 3, because we want the guys who are working, the guys or gals working in 2 or 3 to be aware of that other change.
Of course, that makes complete sense, and it's not in the current release. And it's obviously in roadmap, but
it is in roadmap. Okay.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. In fact, if you go to, and there's a link at the end, if you go to the DevOps Center Trailblazer group, they've been quite explicit about what a roadmap, what's next, and what's later in terms of the roadmap.
Okay.
Does it show you like the dependencies when you like try to deploy, like the change set does?
Yes. Okay. So that's a great question. So back to that slide there. Okay. So one of the issues that we now need to worry about is that when you start to you've now got your work item that's sitting in a queue. This one happens to be approved. You can now check a box there and say, I want to promote it. So it will then go and raise a request inside GitHub to say, are you happy to have this change pushed through? If you don't, if you're not worried about that, you can ignore that, and then you can push it through to the next. Then you can highlight as many and then push them through to the next stage and the next stage. At that point, it's doing.
Yeah, I just want to say, I was working with Bridget this morning for Apex code on campaign figure, and I wasn't able to run this because of some constraints on UCI side. I shared in the teams. It is strange because this constraints firing on code, but that doesn't fire in UI same way how they do in the code, and we need to figure out is this going to be a problem down the road or not for the Tennessee and how UCI does that. And constraint is on the name object, what is child object of account object. Now that I'm saying this wrong, I may be doing some configuration of wrong on constituent name instead of on account name. But okay, let me go back to fix this again and see. This is helpful when I talk loudly. See. But anyhow, this code gives me some tweaking in order to get
Nash. Okay, team. I am pretty sure Nash was on a call there, unless that was a question I misunderstood.
I thought it was a question too, and then I realized nope, he's on a call.
Nash is working. Sorry about that.
Good, because I was getting quite confused. I was like, I think I could answer. No. But it was, what was very interesting is it nearly was a question, because one of the challenges we have with DevOps Center is it's doing the checks that you'd expect with a change set, but it's actually doing more checks. So things like, can you see here it says promotion failed? That promotion may be failed because you're about to push a page layout, which has got a field on it, but you haven't pushed the field. So that new field is down there, and I hadn't pushed the field. So therefore, DevOps Center is saying, hang on, I can't push a page layout with a field on it if the field doesn't exist in the new org. So it's doing checks that you wouldn't normally get in a change set. It would just push it, and then it would fall over in production. So again, it's starting to do some checks. The problem you have is that it then throws up an almost unintelligible GitHub message, which is called, normally it's a rebase message. And again, I know the DevOps Center team are trying to catch those and make them more intelligible. So sometimes people feel like, hang on, this is harder. I mean, a change set would have just pushed it through. Yes, it would, but actually we're trying to catch things earlier. And again, back to my shift left, one of the benefits of actually connecting elements is we'll actually give you even earlier warning of some of those conflicts before you get here. It may be that there was a change being made in another org by another developer that you need to be able to go and make that change. So this is about trying to do a better job of coordinating development across maybe multiple developers. And it's putting a little bit more rigor into the development process, which people go, well, hang on, you'll now give me errors. Why don't you just push it through? The answer is because actually it's trying to help you from breaking the org. So that's another important point around how DevOps Center works. So just to pick up a couple of limitations whilst we're here. One is, as picked up earlier with Alistair, you can't push things back. So you can't go back to DevOps 2 and 3. You've got to manually go and do that. The second thing is, if say one of these work items price needs to be 7 digits, not 9. If you find a bug in that because you're in user acceptance testing, you found it wasn't developed correctly, the only way to go and raise a change to that work item is to create another work item. So once the work item is in process, you can't modify it. So you'd have to create another work item, say work item 58, that says fixing work item 34. Again, in DevOps Center, those things are not connected. Again, part of the Elements integration is we will connect the two of them so you actually can understand why 34 didn't get pushed through is because there's a new one called 58. And then the last limitation is obviously there's no Jira integration yet. So all of these things are somewhere in the pipeline of build, but I know the DevOps Center team are all about how do we get this? How do we get it into GA and start getting people using it? So, so this is just a screenshot of, if you're using Elements, we pop into DevOps Center this idea of, we'll tell you which metadata items being committed, and you can link work items together. You can link it back to any documentation that you may have. So if you've already done some process mapping or some documentation, you can see that in the context of the work item. And then you can see, any of the dependency trees that Elements builds in the context of a work item. So again, if you're about to go and push a change, you may not realize that they're actually downstream. There are some other changes that you may need to include, or at least consider. So again, it's trying to give you that broader picture.
So is there dependency checking?
The only dependency checking is the idea that there's a page layout that references a field. If that field doesn't exist, then I can't push it. Or you built a validation rule that references a field that doesn't currently exist. It's not. It's doing that first level. It's not doing multi-level dependency checking.
Okay. And then what about things like, if something applies to a profile, do you have to include the profile like you do in a change set now?
Yes, you would do. Yes.
Okay.
So there's some things that, think of this as change sets plus. This is not a full-featured DevOps solution. If you do it, this is the free replacement for change sets, rather than a $20, $30, $50, $100,000 investment in a DevOps application.
Where do test classes sit? Like, can you run where you're pushing? If a developer is right, I mean, the majority of us here are admins. I know there's a couple of devs. When they're pushing test classes, how's that getting tied to work items and moving forward and validating? It's not.
It's not. There's nothing there.
Okay.
I mean, the reason we built the integration was, it was only a couple of weeks worth of work, but the ability to start to tie documentation to a work item, so you've got some place to reference things. So we synchronize and keep track of every work item, and so we're telling you, which there's a work item 52. It's linked to Jira. Here's the documentation. Here are the other metadata items that are impacted. When you push metadata items through DevOps Center, we'll do the conflict checking to go, oh, by the way, do you realize this metadata item is also being changed, not just by this work item, but by another work item in another release? So we're doing some of that sophisticated conflict checking. Ultimately, DevOps Center will do all this. It just doesn't do it at the moment. So we built it because it was a good use case, and I'll be very honest, it gave us some great publicity in terms of the Salesforce team talking about us all over the place. And again, it was a relatively easy integration because it mirrors the integration we've got Copado, Gearset, and others. So I'm just conscious of time here. I think there's some considerations when you start to implement this. The first is that this is an opportunity to use the changes you've got to make to re-engineer your DevOps processes. You're going to have to change. You're going to have to think about using GitHub. If you've got developers, you need to get them, if they're using GitHub, you're going to have to set GitHub up. So you're going to have to work with your developers. So another limitation, this is just GitHub. So if your developers are using Bitbucket or GitLab or something else, currently the only supported source control system for DevOps Center is GitHub. There will be others in the future, and I've been told that they will be a paid add-on, but at the moment the focus for the DevOps Center team is let's get GA working with GitHub with the current set of functionality. So the first point is, if you're using change sets, this will be a change in the way you work. And therefore, there's a chance for you to go back and go, how do we do our business analysis? Are we doing a good job of that? How are we building our process maps? How are we doing conflict checking in the business analysis phase? How are we building user stories and getting those signed off? How are we doing user acceptance testing? So there's a chance to just take a quick look at those development processes rather than simply overlaying DevOps Center on top of your existing processes. And the last point is that there are extensions, not just us. Prodly has built some extensions, which is a lot more about pushing metadata around. So to answer Alistair's question about how would you keep different orgs in sync, Prodly has built some capabilities to do that. So they've built an extension to DevOps Center to do that. But by the way, anybody could build an extension. You could build one yourself. DevOps Center is custom objects and flows, and there aren't any page layouts because they've actually hard coded the page layouts. But you can look into and understand how it works. We built the integration with no input from Salesforce at all. We simply took a look at it, looked at the data, and it took us about 2 or 3 days to work out what it was doing so we could build our integration. So again, if you've got an internal team and there's stuff that DevOps Center doesn't do, you could build your own extension if you wanted to. You could add extra fields to the objects. You can't change those screens because those screens are built. Those screens there are hard coded in Heroku. They're not Lightning pages. So that has been a quick sprint through DevOps Center. A couple of screenshots, a couple of QR codes. The Trailblazer community, there are actually 2 communities. There's one for partners and one for customers. That's the link to the customer one. And everything I've just talked about, we built or rewrote an implementation guide alongside Salesforce. So Salesforce has got some really good installation instructions, but it doesn't have anyone thinking about the implementation. So it's about 40 odd pages, but it's an extended version of the discussion that we've just had here. So again, there's a free download from a page on our website. It's a PDF that you can download. And again, that's me. Happy to, if you've got other questions. Again, not a DevOps expert, but I've spent a lot of time around DevOps Center. So happy to have any conversations around Salesforce, business process, or just doing a better job of driving up your internal investment in Salesforce.
Ian, thank you. This has been in-depth and awesome.